What if a billionaire CEO, known for his ruthless ambition, saw a struggling maid's silent pain and decided to change her life forever? What if, in a moment of unexpected generosity, he offered her not only life-saving treatment, but a chance at a future she never thought possible? Could a simple act of kindness truly transform two lives, one rich with wealth, the other burdened by hardship, and create a bond neither of them anticipated? Feeling inspired by this story? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more impactful tales that celebrate the power of kindness and transformation. Join us as we share life-changing moments that remind us all to make a difference. Elliot Donovan, a billionaire tech mogul, was known for his sharp intellect and no-nonsense approach to business. A self-made man, he had built his sprawling empire from the ground up. Despite his wealth, Elliot kept a low personal profile, rarely sharing anything about his private life. His cold demeanor in business was only overshadowed by the ruthless ambition that drove him. Sarah, a young and quiet maid, had recently been hired to work in Donovan's mansion. She was hard-working and reserved, always keeping a positive attitude despite the exhaustion that came with her demanding job. Though she was just an employee, her kindness had not gone unnoticed by Elliot. One morning, Elliot noticed something troubling. He saw Sarah struggling with her duties. She was pale, fatigued, and seemed to be in pain. A sharp observer, Elliot watched her for a few days, noticing her slumped posture, unsteady steps, and the increasing strain in her movements. He was concerned, but he was also a man who rarely let emotions dictate his actions. Over the next few days, Elliot couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. He observed her closely, every little movement seeming to confirm his suspicions. She wasn't just tired. Something was wrong, something deeper. But, as usual, he kept his focus on business and avoided meddling in personal matters. The tipping point came one afternoon when Elliot was reviewing some documents in the hallway. The sound of footsteps caught his attention, and he turned to see Sarah approaching, struggling to carry a heavy load of groceries. Her movements were slow, and she seemed to be holding herself up by sheer willpower. As she reached the doorway, she wavered on her feet, nearly dropping the bags. Without thinking, Elliot rushed forward, catching her just before she collapsed. She looked at him, startled and embarrassed, muttering a weak apology. Her face was pale, and there was a look of defeat in her eyes, as if she had been pushing herself too far for too long. Elliot's eyes narrowed as he assessed her condition. She wasn't just fatigued. This was something more serious. "I need to take you to the doctor," Elliot said, his tone firm but not unkind. Sarah protested weakly, insisting it wasn't necessary, but Elliot wouldn't hear of it. He was a man who made decisions quickly, and once made, they were not up for debate. "I'm not asking," he said, taking out his phone and making arrangements for a driver to take them to the best medical clinic in the city. As they got into the car, Sarah remained quiet, still trying to convince herself that nothing was wrong. Elliot could feel the weight of the situation settling over him. He wasn't just offering help in a professional capacity. This felt personal. The cold, controlled CEO that had built an empire through calculated decisions was now faced with something he couldn't ignore. For the first time, he found himself stepping into someone's life, not because it was his duty, but because he couldn't simply stand by and do nothing. Elliot's car came to a smooth stop outside the private clinic, its sleek, modern facade standing in stark contrast to the surrounding neighborhood. Sarah, still uncertain and uneasy, looked up at the building as she stepped out of the car. The staff immediately noticed the billionaire's presence, and though they remained professional, there was a palpable sense of surprise and reverence as they ushered them through the doors. The clinic was pristine, with soft lighting and marble floors that reflected the wealth and luxury Elliot was accustomed to. As they made their way to the examination room, Sarah's nerves were palpable. She hadn't expected any of this. She had tried to convince herself that she was fine, that the fatigue, the dizziness, It was all just stress. But now, with Elliot by her side, things felt different. He wasn't just a wealthy man bringing her here out of obligation. His concern seemed real, and she didn't know how to process it. When they entered the examination room, the doctor, a middle-aged man with a stern but kind expression, looked up from his notes. He immediately recognized Elliot Donovan and nodded respectfully. But it was Sarah who needed attention now, and without hesitation, the doctor quickly began his examination, running a series of tests, taking her blood pressure, asking about her symptoms, and listening intently as Sarah quietly explained how she had been feeling for the past few weeks. The wait was long, stretching the already tense atmosphere. Sarah sat on the examination table, her hands clasped tightly together. She glanced at Elliot, whose eyes were fixed on his phone, but his presence seemed comforting in a way. She didn't know what the doctor would say, but she dreaded hearing the truth. After what felt like an eternity, the doctor returned. He stood by the door for a moment before slowly approaching Sarah, his face grim. Elliot could sense the seriousness of the moment. He put down his phone and focused on the doctor, knowing this wasn't going to be a routine checkup. "Sarah," the doctor began, his voice low, "I've reviewed the test results, and I'm afraid the diagnosis is serious. You have a life-threatening disease that will require extensive and expensive treatment. Without it, your condition could worsen rapidly." He paused, allowing the gravity of the situation to sink in. "The treatment will be long-term and costly. It's well beyond what most people can afford, and that will be a major hurdle." Elliot remained still, his face betraying no emotion. Sarah, on the other hand, was visibly shaken. She could feel the walls closing in on her. The doctor's words echoed in her mind. Life-threatening, expensive, out of her reach. The weight of it all seemed unbearable. I don't know how I can pay for this," Sarah said quietly, looking at the floor. "I can't even afford to go to a normal doctor, let alone—" She couldn't bring herself to finish the sentence. The thought of the financial burden was too much. Her eyes were welling with tears as she glanced over at Elliot, her heart sinking with guilt. She had never wanted to trouble him. She was just a maid. Why should someone like him care about her? She immediately began apologizing, feeling unworthy of his attention, let alone the life-saving treatment she so desperately needed. "I'm so sorry to bother you with this, Mr. Donovan," she whispered, wiping away a tear. "I didn't want to be a burden. Please, I'm fine. I don't deserve this kind of help." Elliot's gaze softened, his usual cold demeanor shifting for the first time in Sarah's presence. He stood up from his chair, walked over to the doctor, and without skipping a beat, took out his wallet. "How much is the treatment?" he asked calmly. The doctor hesitated, clearly taken aback by Elliot's sudden response. "It's a substantial amount, sir. The treatment, including medication, hospital stays, and regular visits, could easily exceed hundreds of thousands. It's a long-term process." Without hesitation, Elliot handed the doctor his debit card, his voice steady. "Deduct any amount necessary from my account. Make sure she gets the best care. No limits." Sarah's eyes widened in shock, her breath catching in her throat. She couldn't comprehend what was happening. She had expected a form of sympathy, perhaps a few kind words, but this was beyond anything she could have imagined. Elliot Donovan, the cold and calculated businessman, was paying for her treatment without a second thought. "But, Mr. Donovan, you don't need to—" Sarah started, but her words were cut off as Elliot held up a hand, signaling her to stop. "I'm not doing this out of obligation," he said, his tone unexpectedly soft but firm. "You'll get the care you need. Don't worry about the cost. Focus on getting better." Sarah could hardly process what was happening. She had never in her life felt so overwhelmed by someone's generosity, let alone someone like Elliot. She wanted to protest, to tell him she didn't deserve such kindness, but the words wouldn't come. As the doctor processed the payment and began preparing the necessary arrangements for Sarah's treatment, Elliot stood in silence, his expression as unreadable as ever. But in the back of his mind, something had shifted. He hadn't acted out of pity. It was more than that. Something in him had been moved by Sarah's quiet strength and her unwavering determination to keep going, despite the toll it was taking on her. And as Sarah left the clinic later that day, her body weary, but her heart filled with a mix of disbelief and gratitude, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life had been irrevocably changed. Not just because of the treatment, but because Elliot Donovan, a man who had built an empire on logic and reason, had done something entirely irrational. He had cared. Over the following months, Sarah's life became a blur of treatments, doctor's appointments, and medication schedules. Each day felt like an uphill battle, but she was determined to fight. The disease had taken a toll on her body, but she was slowly beginning to heal. With each visit to the clinic, she grew stronger, and the support Elliot provided made all the difference. He checked in on her regularly, ensuring that she had everything she needed, whether it was the best doctors, extra comfort in her room, or simple gestures of kindness like fresh flowers or her favorite tea. She couldn't recall a time when she had felt so cared for. Elliot's visits were frequent, though short. He would arrive with his usual serious demeanor, but each time she noticed something different. He was softer, more human. At first, he would simply ask about her treatment and leave, his face as unreadable as ever. But over time, their interactions grew warmer, more personal. He would sit with her in her hospital room, talking about anything but business. They would share stories, small, personal anecdotes that Elliot had never shared with anyone. He spoke of his early days, of the sleepless nights spent building his empire. For Sarah, it was a window into a world she had never seen. Beneath the CEO's hard exterior, she saw the cracks that told of a man who, despite his success, was still haunted by loneliness. Elliot Donovan, the powerful mogul, had achieved everything many could only dream of, yet he had no one to share it with. His life was full of admiration but empty of affection. He had chosen his career over relationships, and in doing so, he had distanced himself from the very connections that could have made his triumphs meaningful. During one of their conversations, as Sarah lay in her bed, propped up by pillows, she asked him, "Do you ever regret it? Sacrificing everything for your business?" Elliot hesitated, his fingers tapping lightly on the armrest of his chair. His eyes darkened for a moment, the weight of the question sinking in. "I don't know what I would have done differently," he finally replied, his voice quieter than usual. "I've spent my life building this company, creating something that will outlast me. But it comes at a price. I've had to let go of personal connections, friends, family, love." Sarah, lying there in the sterile white room, saw him in a new light. She had always seen him as untouchable, someone whose life was perfect in every way. But now she realized he was just as human as anyone else, carrying the same emotional baggage she did, only buried beneath layers of wealth and success. Through these conversations, Sarah learned that Elliot's ambition was both his strength and his curse. He had worked tirelessly to build his empire, but in doing so, he had lost the very thing that many people cherished most: the deep, meaningful connections that made life worth living. As the weeks passed, Sarah began to notice changes, not only in her physical health, but also in her perspective on life. The pain and exhaustion that had once dominated her days started to fade, replaced by a renewed sense of hope. The doctor had said she'd need a long road to recovery, but now Sarah believed it was possible. For the first time in what felt like years, she had hope for the future. She was more than just an employee, more than just a maid working for a billionaire. She had value. She had a future, and for the first time, she believed she could take control of it. Her body healed steadily, and with each passing day, she felt stronger, physically and emotionally. She began to appreciate the small things: the feel of the sun on her skin as she stepped outside for a short walk, the laughter of her family when they visited her, and the strength she found within herself. Elliot's gestures had made a difference, but more importantly, his quiet presence had helped her believe in herself again. She had always felt like an invisible part of the world, unnoticed and unimportant. But Elliot had given her something priceless: the belief that she was worthy of a future, of a life beyond her job as a maid. As Sarah's health improved, so did the connection between her and Elliot. What had started as an act of kindness, him paying for her treatment, had blossomed into something deeper. There was mutual respect between them, a quiet understanding. Sarah admired Elliot for his drive, his ability to build an empire, while Elliot admired Sarah's resilience and her ability to maintain kindness despite the harshness of her own struggles. They had crossed a line that neither had expected. The power dynamics between them had shifted. Elliot, the CEO who had always been in control, found himself drawn to Sarah in a way he hadn't anticipated. And Sarah, the maid who had once felt insignificant, now stood as an equal in his eyes. Their growing connection was subtle at first. Small moments, exchanged glances, brief touches of hands as they passed things to each other. But over time, it became undeniable. They were no longer just employer and employee. They had become two people who understood each other in ways no one else did. Neither of them had expected their bond to grow so strong, but neither could deny the magnetic pull that had developed between them. Elliot began to find himself looking forward to their conversations. He found solace in Sarah's quiet strength, and she, in turn, found comfort in his company. They had both been broken by different circumstances, but together they were starting to heal. Once Sarah had fully recovered, the days of hospital visits and endless medical procedures felt like a distant memory. Her body was stronger, and her spirit, once fragile, was now full of newfound hope. But nothing could have prepared her for the surprise Elliot had in store for her. It happened on a quiet afternoon, when Sarah was back at work, tending to her usual duties around the mansion. Elliot called her into his office, and though her heart skipped a beat, she had no idea what to expect. As she walked through the grand hallway toward the office, a sense of uncertainty washed over her. What now? She had no idea that this meeting would change her life yet again. Elliot was seated at his desk when she entered, his usual serious expression in place. But today, there was something different about him, something more relaxed, more approachable. He looked up from the papers in front of him and motioned for her to sit down. "Sarah," he began, his voice steady but warm, "I've been thinking about everything that's happened over the past few months. You've been through a lot, and I know how difficult it's been for you and your family." Sarah, who had always kept her distance from personal matters, remained silent. She wasn't sure what he was about to say, but she had a feeling it would be significant. "I want to help you," Elliot continued, his gaze unwavering. "I know you've had to struggle to make ends meet, and I don't want you or your family to ever have to face those kinds of hardships again." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. She had already been more grateful than words could express for everything Elliot had done for her. But this, it felt like too much. "I've arranged for health insurance," he said, "for you and your entire family. For life. You'll never have to worry about medical bills again." Sarah was speechless, her mind struggling to comprehend what he had just said. Her heart raced, and she felt the weight of his words sink deep into her chest. Health insurance for her family? For life? It was an offer that sounded too good to be true, and yet Elliot's calm and matter-of-fact tone left no room for doubt. She looked at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Mr. Donovan, I don't know what to say. This is too much." Elliot gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. "It's not too much," he said. "It's the least I can do after everything you've been through. You've shown incredible strength, and I want to ensure that you and your family can live without fear of financial burden. You deserve that peace of mind." Sarah felt the overwhelming wave of emotion rise in her chest, threatening to spill over. She had never known generosity like this, certainly not from someone of Elliot's stature. This wasn't just about money. It was about a profound shift in how she viewed the world. It was a reminder that there were still good people out there, people who gave without expecting anything in return. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you enough. This is more than I ever imagined. You've already done so much for me. And now this." Elliot's expression softened. "You don't need to thank me. This is about acknowledging your strength, your perseverance. I believe in rewarding people who show true character. You've earned this, Sarah. And I believe you'll use this opportunity to build a better future for yourself and your family." Sarah's mind was racing. She had always thought of herself as small, insignificant, a maid in the mansion of a billionaire, nothing more than an employee with little chance of ever changing her circumstances. But now her life had taken a sharp turn. Elliot's generosity had changed the course of her future in ways she could never have anticipated. Her family, once on the brink of despair due to medical costs, now had security. They would no longer have to choose between health and survival. The weight of those constant fears was lifted, and Sarah could finally breathe without the crushing burden of worry. But more than that, Elliot had given her something intangible, a sense of worth, a belief that she wasn't just an employee, but a person deserving of care, respect, and a chance to thrive. As the days went by, Sarah found herself constantly thinking about what Elliot had done for her. She had always viewed him as a distant, intimidating figure, someone whose life was built on cold, calculated decisions. But now she saw him differently. Elliot Donovan wasn't just a successful CEO. He was a man capable of immense kindness, a man who had taken the time to see her as more than just the maid. For Elliot, the act of giving had stirred something within him. He had been so focused on his empire, so absorbed in his ambition, that he had forgotten what it was like to truly make a difference in someone's life. Helping Sarah, seeing the profound impact it had on her and her family, made him realize something he had never fully understood. There was more to life than business deals and power. There was fulfillment in making a genuine difference in someone's life, in offering kindness where it was needed most. In the weeks that followed, Sarah's life began to shift. She could now look ahead to a future without the constant fear of financial ruin. Her family thrived, and she found herself contemplating new opportunities, ones she had never thought possible before. She began taking night classes, exploring ways to improve herself and build a better future. And while her bond with Elliot remained professional, there was an unspoken understanding between them, a deep, mutual respect for each other's strength and character. As for Elliot, he watched Sarah with quiet pride, knowing that he had done something far beyond a financial transaction. He had given someone the chance to live, to dream, and to thrive. And in return, he had gained something he hadn't realized he was missing: the satisfaction of knowing that, just for once, his actions had truly made a difference. As time passed, Elliot found himself alone in his office one evening, the soft glow of his desk lamp casting long shadows on the walls. The world outside was bustling, but within the confines of his high-rise, Elliot sat quietly, lost in thought. His empire was thriving, his business acumen still unmatched, but something had shifted within him, a change that he couldn't ignore. He thought back to the day when he had first noticed Sarah's struggle, the day he had made the decision to intervene. It felt like a lifetime ago now, and yet the impact of that choice had reverberated through his life in ways he hadn't expected. The act of helping Sarah, of offering her a chance at life, had opened a door to something deeper, a realization that, for all his wealth and success, he had neglected the one thing that truly mattered: human connection. Elliot had spent years building his empire, accumulating wealth, and achieving the kind of success that most people only dreamed of. But in his pursuit of greatness, he had sacrificed personal connections, choosing to keep his emotions and vulnerabilities hidden beneath a thick shell of professionalism. Helping Sarah had changed that. For the first time, Elliot had stepped outside the confines of his business-focused mindset and embraced the opportunity to make a real difference in someone's life. The sense of fulfillment he had experienced from that act of kindness had sparked something in him, a desire to continue helping, to continue making a difference not just for his company, but for the people around him. The realization was both humbling and empowering. Elliot knew that he wanted to do more. He wanted to create something that would leave a lasting legacy, something that would reflect his newfound understanding of the world and his place in it. It wasn't enough for him to simply run a successful business. He wanted to build something that would help others, something that would ensure no one had to face the struggles Sarah had endured alone. Meanwhile, Sarah had found herself on a new path, one she never imagined she would walk. With her family's health secured, the financial stability provided by Elliot's generosity had opened up opportunities she never thought possible. The burden of medical bills and uncertainty had been lifted, allowing Sarah to breathe a little easier. With the support of her family and the encouragement of Elliot, she decided to pursue an education, something she had always dreamed of but never thought feasible. She enrolled in a local community college, determined to build a future for herself that wasn't defined by her past struggles. For the first time, Sarah felt like she had control over her destiny. She was no longer just the maid in the mansion. She was a woman with dreams, with goals, and with the power to make those dreams a reality. As she sat in her first class, surrounded by people who had never known the hardships she had faced, she felt a sense of pride and hope. She had come so far, and she knew that the future was hers to shape. Elliot watched Sarah's transformation from a distance, quietly proud of the woman she was becoming. But he also knew that this was just the beginning. His actions, though impactful, were not enough. He wanted to create something more lasting, something that would ensure that people like Sarah would never have to face such struggles again. And so, Elliot took the next step. He established a foundation dedicated to providing healthcare assistance to his employees and their families, ensuring that no one in his company had to face medical hardships alone. It was an initiative that reflected the values he had come to understand: compassion, empathy, and the importance of caring for those around you. The foundation became a cornerstone of Elliot's legacy, a symbol of the man he had become. It wasn't just about business anymore. It was about making a real difference, about giving people the tools to succeed, to live without fear, and to thrive. Months later, Sarah visited Elliot's office. She had been doing well in her studies, and though she was still finding her way, she was confident in the future that lay ahead. She stood in the doorway of his office, hesitating for a moment before entering. Elliot looked up from his desk, his face softening as he saw her. "Sarah," he said with a smile, "it's good to see you. How are things going?" "I'm doing well, Mr. Donovan," Sarah replied, her voice steady but filled with gratitude. "I wanted to thank you again for everything. I can't even begin to express what you've done for me." Elliot nodded, a quiet understanding passing between them. "You've done the hard part, Sarah. You've taken control of your life. I'm just glad I could help you along the way." Sarah's eyes shone with sincerity. "You've done more than help me. You've given me a chance at a life I never thought possible. You've given me hope." Elliot's heart swelled with something he hadn't felt in years: fulfillment. He realized then that this was the true measure of success. Not the wealth or the empire, but the lives he had touched, the people he had helped along the way. For the first time, he understood that his impact went far beyond business. It was the difference he made in people's lives that would truly define his legacy. As Sarah left his office, she looked back at him one last time. There was a smile on her face, a smile that Elliot knew would stay with him for the rest of his life. She was no longer the maid in his mansion. She was a woman with a future she had fought for and earned. Elliot watched her walk down the hallway, the sound of her footsteps echoing in the silence of the grand mansion. He had given her a chance, but in return, she had given him something far more valuable. A lesson in what it truly meant to succeed.